My name is Dr. Ian Storch. I'm a board-certified gastroenterologist and osteopathic physician, and you are listening to DO or Do Not. If you're interested in joining our team or have suggestions or comments, please contact us at doordonotpodcast.com. Share our link with your friends and like us on Apple Podcasts, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We hope you enjoy this episode.
My name is Mason D'Amelio, and I'm a first-year medical student at the Alabama College of Osteopathic Medicine, and you're listening to the DO or Do Not podcast. This week, we are joined by Dr. Richard Jadick, author of the book On Call in Hell, about his time as a physician and a Navy corpsman, where he was awarded the Bronze Star with Combat V device for heroic valor after he saved the lives of many Marines during the Second Battle of Fallujah. When he returned from his tour, Dr. Jadick was featured on the cover of Newsweek as Hero MD. Dr. Jadick talks about his journey to osteopathic medicine, starting with his origin story of how his drive to become a physician was born one snowy night as a Marine after college. Yes, he was a Marine before joining the Navy. Dr. Jadick details his time in the Marines before his medical career, what his naval life was like during and after medical school, and how a urology residency program at MCB in Augusta held his position while he was serving our country in Iraq. The most inspiring part of the interview is Dr. Jadick's description of the Battle of Fallujah and his idea of the forward aid station, which focused on the belief that the physician should be as close to the front lines as possible due to the fact that every minute following an injury is crucial. I found Dr. Jadick's story to be fascinating, and I am proud that I will share a common degree of DO with such a physician, and we thank him for his service. Please enjoy this incredible episode.
All right, Richard, I'm so excited to have you on today. Thank you for being with us.
Well, thanks for having me. This is an honor.
Richard, I just want to start with basic urology questions. So as a urologist, can you just tell us a little bit about the scope of practice of a urologist, what a urologist's job encompasses, and then specifically what you do and what your day looks like?
All right. So why I went into urology, I always thought I wanted to be a general surgeon, got into general surgery. Personalities are different in general surgery than in urology, and I tended to gravitate more towards people who took themselves less seriously than general surgeons. So I enjoyed the urology banter. And then I started looking at the scope of the practice. And literally, you're taking care of a host of things. You're taking care of cancer. You're taking care of problems with infertility. You're taking care of problems with stones. So and my basic practice is general urology. So prostate cancer, kidney cancer. I do robotics. I do not do robotic prostatectomies, but I do robotic kidneys. I like the cutting edge of the practice. And as well, I like when I do a cancer procedure, I take out a kidney or I do a partial nephrectomy, take out a part of the kidney. I can literally look at somebody and say, your cancer is gone. And that's a good feeling. I do enjoy that. I enjoy the fact that when patients come in pain, I can make the pain go away. So the scope is large, and I do 2 days a week in the operating room. And then I do 3 days a week in clinic. And I see a lot of patients. I'm in a place that has been underserved in urology for a long time. So I probably see 40 patients 3 days a week and operate anywhere from 8 to 12 patients on Wednesday and Friday. And I enjoy it. Urology becomes a community base. You continue to follow your patients. You just don't operate on them and leave them. You follow them. You take care of them. Sometimes you take care of things that is probably outside the urologic scope, but I always believe if you're good in your practice, patients come to you with other questions because they trust you. So we do that. I do feel that I've become very integral in my little community of LaGrange.
So, Richard, I think that's really interesting. For like a general surgeon, they would be more operating on a hernia, gallbladder, operate on the patient, and then they're done with the patient. For your practice, you really feel like for certain things, you're their doc.
Absolutely. So I became a DO because I wanted to be a family practitioner. And then as time went on, I realized that I wanted to fix things and not manage things. So I did get into the surgical side of things. And I enjoyed that very much because you do fix problems. What I found was in urology, I could do both. I could be the guy who follows up the chronic UTIs every 6 months and put them on programs that prevent the UTIs. And I can manage certain things and I can fix certain things. But it seems that 90% of my patients are with me until they move or go somewhere else.
That's awesome, Richard. Richard, I have so many questions for you, and it's, I think, a little less linear than a lot of interviews. But the main reason that I called you to see if you would be on our podcast is because I read your book, which is spectacular. For anyone listening that's interested in reading the book, I highly recommend it. It's called On Call in Hell. So can you tell us a little bit about how the idea for the book came about and how it was written?
That's an interesting question. So I had spent all my time with the military. I was a Marine for 7 years. I did not go to the Gulf War. And as a Marine, that tended to be the kiss of death, or so I thought. So I applied to medical school and was given a great opportunity by New York College of Osteopathic Medicine to actually practice. Came out after a year and spent my time again as a general medical officer with the Marines, only having done a 1-year surgical internship. And I really enjoyed that. The book, because of my military background and how long it took me to get to residency, because after that 9/11 happened, I was a second-year general surgeon in a 2 and 4 program for urology. I wound up going back after 9/11 to the Marines because that's the needs of the Navy. Went back with them, went into Iraq twice in the Battle of Fallujah, and wound up after Fallujah was over in 2005, going to a residency in March, totally off cycle because they held the position while I was over there, in a civilian program at MCG in Augusta. And I had been the recipient of the Bronze Star with V, which came over the news, and went to Georgia to the medical college. So my director of urology, Ron Lewis, a former Navy guy, was like, well, here's what we're going to do. You get 1 month of research. This guy's calling me about you writing a book. How about you write a book? I said, well, nobody's called me about writing a book. And lo and behold, somebody had been calling the program, and I got 1 month off to tell my story to somebody who actually wrote the book. I did not write the book. I obviously had a ghostwriter. I did a lot of editing, but most of it was his talent.
And the story is really, you're being very modest, I think, and I appreciate that you've done a lot in your time and are not an English major who's writing a novel, but the story is really the spectacular part. And for anyone listening, that was a fast forward of a super amazing story, which is kind of summarized in the book. And I want to touch back on some of those things. So as far as the accolades that you got, and I just want to start with that, there was a Newsweek cover story where you were highlighted. You're on the cover of Newsweek and it says Hero MD. It's amazing. And I looked at it, and I think a lot of DOs would be offended by it. Again, myself, I'm just proud. And obviously they're just saying, look, this is a doctor that we want to highlight. And when I looked on Newsweek's site, so this was March 20th of 2006. And on the 21st, the next day, I believe, after it was published, there was a edit on that published by Newsweek. It said, on our March 20th cover, we referred to Dr. Richard Jadick, the brave military physician who saved dozens of lives during the Battle of Fallujah. As, quote, Hero MD, Dr. Jadick is in fact a DO, a doctor of osteopathic medicine. Osteopathic medicine takes a holistic approach to medical care, emphasizing prevention and focusing on the body's musculoskeletal system. It's just so funny. And I was thinking as I was reading this, what would my DO buddies from med school say if I was on the cover of Newsweek quoted that way? And I was just so proud that after and looked it up, I saw this edit on their site. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So I had no idea it was going to be a cover story. They did an article. I came back. I started talking to Pat Wingert about the story. She's an editor for Newsweek, and I had never told the story. So it was a year after I started residency, and she took me through the paces. For about 2 weeks, I told her bits and pieces of my story until I realized I think I realized how much I had gone through because I literally flew back. I walked off the airplane and showed up and started a residency a week later. So we had to move from Camp Lejeune all the way out to Augusta. So it was a lot of things going on. When I finally sat down and thought about what had happened, and she was asking me questions, and I went through the whole story. So she told me she was doing an article on 1st Battalion, 8th Marines. And she wanted to take some pictures. We took some pictures. Probably about 2 or 3 weeks later, it was a Sunday, and the magazine came out on Monday, and my wife said, they just sent me an email. You're on the cover of Newsweek tomorrow, and it says MD. So I think you're in a lot of trouble. Now, my wife is a DO as well. She says, I think you're in a lot of trouble. So I called him immediately and said, I'm not an MD, I'm a DO. And Pat Wingert, and this is a little funny, she's like, I couldn't put DO on there because DO, people would think of you as, they wouldn't know. They would say, doctor, physician, do what, And so she said, it just, unfortunately, it probably is way better now, but back then she's like, I had to put MD. And she says, and we will do a retraction the day after the article comes out. So it was somewhat planned. I don't know if that's good or bad. I don't know if that helps DOs feel better. But when it came out, I got the AOA calling me. I got people calling me saying, what? How'd you let that happen? And the truth is, it wasn't about DO or MD. It was literally about Fallujah. So the politics of it mattered very little to me. It was a story about people through my eyes, I guess. And then the book came out, and I had the opportunity to tell more about my Marines and the corpsmen I worked with.
Richard, when I read the book, I couldn't have been more proud to have gone to the same school that you went to, the way you describe the osteopathic school that you attended in the book. So I just thought it was funny personally as a DO that's how they list you. And again, like you said, I think we as osteopaths, and this is why we're doing the podcast, need to talk a little bit more about what we do so people recognize it. But I think my buddies would have just laughed when they saw the cover. And then I think the retraction says it all, that you're proud of who you are. And I thought it was perfect personally.
Well, good. Yeah, I'm sure I ruffled feathers.
I don't want to ruin the book. And the book is spectacular. Your story is documented in the book. But can you talk to us a little bit? I guess the general idea of the book, outside of just your amazing experience, is the idea of the forward aid station. I think it's worth just asking you to comment a little bit about what that was and how that impacted the Battle of Fallujah and why this was so important.
In my second year after 9/11, they sent me to shock trauma in Baltimore. So I spent 3 months up there, literally a tremendous level 1 facility and level 1 trauma facility. Everything came there: gunshots, knife shots, car accidents, everything except pediatrics would show up there. So I learned a lot about trauma very quickly, being on call every 3 nights. And it was just a miserable 3-month experience. However, it's probably what got me to where I was. The piece of it that stuck with me was R. Adams Cowley, who the Shock Trauma Center is named after, also did his research and studies on trauma. If somebody comes in within an hour, they live. Somebody leaves, if they come in later than an hour, their chances of survival are much less after a severe traumatic injury. And as I was going through this, and that tends to be the mindset of the Marine Corps, what I realized was gunshots, people bleed out very quickly. So the golden hour, really much less impression on a combat situation than does what I think is really the right people at the right place at the right time. And the right time is kind of the point. It's not an hour. It's not 30 minutes. There's no time you can give it. It's as soon as possible. So if somebody's getting shot, as soon as you can get there to stop that bleeding or render aid or get him out of a kill zone, that means that patient's going to have a better chance of survival. And the guy who's there who knows the most is going to be able to help him more than the guy who doesn't know the most. So my thought process was, I got to get really close. I got to get really far forward, get there, because I was the most experienced. I had enough trauma experience that I could show the people that were working with me what to do next. And so every time trauma happened, they saw what I did. and they could take it on. It's not about just me doing it. It's about me showing them how to do it. And they didn't have that opportunity. They were 18, 19-year-old kids on the front line as corpsmen, try to figure out, do I put a tourniquet on? Don't I put a tourniquet on? And back then, tourniquets, this is relatively new in combat. Tourniquets, they were a big deal in that everybody said, oh, it crushes tissue, it kills tissue, they're going to lose a limb. And I taught all my guys, I said, put a tourniquet on everybody, because guess what? A dead limb is better than a dead Marine. So that we can deal with the rest of it later, get them to live. And so tourniquets became a much more accepted modality to treat trauma than as time went on. And it had nothing to do with me. That just, people just started to think the way I did. They're like, oh, yeah, it makes sense. You know, if they're bleeding, stop the bleeding. That's what you can do and get them out of there as quickly as possible. So that was my thought. I was not a big believer in the golden hour. And I had to tell my colonel, Marines are very, hey, 1 hour that's what we got to do. If we, you know, so they would map it out. It'll be 60 minutes. It'll be 59 minutes. We'll get them to surgical or something. And I really had to kind of sell my point that the sooner I'm there, the sooner we can get patients at least stable, the more time they have to get to a surgical suite where they can actually get operated on and have some stabilization surgery and sent off to not just a roll 2, but a roll 3 and further back.
And Richard, just so people understand the context, from what I understand from the book, you were, during the Battle of Fallujah, you were a little bit older, you volunteered, and you really, you know, by doing this, it sounds great, but you were really in harm's way and much closer to the battlefront than a doctor might normally be. Is that right?
Yeah, there was a point the first night I went into the city of Fallujah that we actually got ahead of our forward battle edge. So what had happened was we got behind one of the companies who pushed, they went into a government complex, and in the middle of the night, as we were setting up my aid station, and really not much setup, it was 2 track vehicles, and we would set up kind of a sandbagged area to see patients in. The company moved out at about 2 a.m. and had moved to different positions. So in front of us was nothing but insurgents. And we woke up to some sniper fire and some other things that medical people don't like to see. So we did on multiple occasions. There's one where I was in an ambush treating patients, trying to get them out, and snipers all the time. It was, yeah, it was a little surreal at times. But the point was, and this is how I saw my colonel, I think doctors and sometimes military people think, hey, your doctor is just in case of emergency. And what I always say is, well, you're at war. What other emergency can there be? I don't know what else happens that's worse, you know? So put him in the front. If you lose him, okay, but at least he was there to, at least what it is parlaying or training or showing the next group, the kids, the corpsmen, how to do their job. And they were phenomenal at that. They were phenomenal at picking up what I was able to show them. And there was a point at the end where they could have done all the things that I was doing, they could have done, except a couple of things. But for the most part, they were running their own traumas.
Again, I think I can't say enough. The book is great. Your modesty is great. And your love and respect for the corpsmen is clearly shown the way the author documents your story.
I mean, these kids, and they showed up, and I can't, you're right. I can't say enough about them because they're 18 and 19. They are with their friends. These are the people, they're in these units, these kids that they see, you know, I knew them, but they knew them because they're the guy who lived in the bunk next to them or on the sleeping bag next to them. And these guys would come up all, you know, they were dying, some of them, and some of them were just in such terrible shape that their friends couldn't recognize them. And that was hard. So not only there's a piece of me that's training them, trying to get them ready for what they're going to see, but there's also the aftermath of what they just saw. And you have to be the guy who figures out how to take care of that.
I'm going to dial it back. I'm going to tone it down a little bit, and I appreciate all of that. Can you start all the way back at the beginning and tell us a little bit about where you grew up? Obviously, you alluded a little bit to the fact that you were a Marine before you were in the Navy with all of this medical expertise. So can you tell us where you grew up, when you became a Marine, how you decided on that, and where you went to college, and kind of go into when you decided you wanted to be a doctor?
Wanting to be a doctor probably started somewhere around fifth grade, fourth grade. Now, maybe not a doctor. I always wanted to be in the military. I wanted to go to West Point. This is what I wanted to do. I watched all the war movies. That was it. But then I started watching MASH sometime in middle school. And I just could not get over. I mean, I watched them all, and I could not get over how cool Hawkeye Pierce was. And I'm like, that's what I want to do. That I can go to war, I can be a part of all that, but I don't have to shoot people. So that became literally the springboard to where I wanted to be. Did I ever think I would get there? No, because as life goes on, you do things. You may not make grades as the way you want to, and do other things. So I grew up in Slingerlands, New York, which is just south of Albany, way north of the city, about 2.5 hours. I grew up in a kind of a rural community, and we did a lot of playing war and then watching MASH and doing those things. And I played football and I wrestled. So I enjoyed the leadership piece of it. So when I was in high school, I applied to West Point. I got a senator nomination from Sam Stratton and went off to a week's worth of time there to prepare for the summer as you enter into West Point. And then my final physical after that, I was disqualified for my eyes. Now, I've had several surgeries on my eyes for depth perception and strabismus, and I couldn't get within their world. And I remember as a kid, I've taken these tests forever. And I know what the test is going to be, and I know how to look at it, and I know how to make it look like I know what I'm doing. They came up with something that I couldn't figure out because the first time I saw it, and I couldn't get waived. They didn't waive me, and I assumed I was going to just enlist in the Marine Corps. I went to the Marine, talked to the sergeant. I'm like, all right, let's talk about enlistment. And as I went into his office for the second or third time, an officer recruiter came through and picked up my paperwork, said, hey, this is the same application for an ROTC scholarship. Do you want to go to college? I said, okay, that'll be fun. Man, it literally, this is how it happened. And I came home to my parents. I said, hey, I'm not going to enlist in the Marine Corps. They gave me this. And the application went through. 2 weeks later, they called me and said, you have a scholarship. It was 1983. Trust me, nobody was going in the military. They're all going to Wall Street. It was an easy deal. And I told the officer recruiter, I said, the Army won't have me because of my eyesight. And he said, we don't care. So he just literally said, I don't care. And he probably had a quota to fill. It was May, and there I was. So I showed up, applied to Ithaca College, I applied to I think 3 colleges. All of them were SUNY. It was SUNY Oswego, Cortland. And when this was all through, I applied to Ithaca and went to Ithaca. I sent them tapes of me wrestling, because they'd already filled. They're like, okay, we'll take you. And I had an RTC scholarship, and they accepted me, and I never wrestled. I was like, all right, forget that. They're not paying me, and that looks like work. So I cross-enrolled. The whole unit was at Cornell. Cross-enrolled to Cornell go down the hill. I don't know if anybody's ever been to Ithaca. You walk a mile downhill to walk a mile uphill to Cornell. So it's a 2-mile walk that is down and up and painful in snow. So did a lot of that over the next 4 years and got commissioned in 1987 as a second lieutenant in the Marine Corps.
The story is spectacular so far. I mean, it's so modest, but now you're in the Marine Corps, and tell me about briefly how that was, and then when you decided you wanted to go to med school.
So now I'm in the Marine Corps. I get through TBS. I do not want to be in the infantry because that looks really hard. So I go to communication schools. That's 3 months. I go to a unit with the Air Wing. I'm with them. Then I get transferred down to 3rd Battalion, 2nd Marines, which is an infantry battalion. And I just really loved being with the infantry. At that point, it was great. I deployed quite a bit to, you think you're joining the Marines and it's all going to be warm weather, sands of Iwo Jima, and, you're going to the South Pacific, you're going to South America. No, I went to Norway 3 years in a row, 3 months at a time, sat on the border with Russia in Norway and froze my butt off for 3 years. Came back with all this. Every time I came back, they'd send me to some cold weather training program. They sent me to Mount Warfare School in Bridgeport, Fort McCoy, everything in sub-zero. I mean, literally below zero weather, snow to 6 feet. It was crazy. Skis, snowshoes. I hated it, but but I did it because they told me that's what I had to do. But I'll never forget. And this kind of pushed me along. I'm like, all right, I can still do this military thing. I want to do more comfortable military stuff. And I was in the Sierra Nevada mountains and living in a snow cave. So we were digging our snow caves, living in cold, and got up one morning. One of the Marines I was with had a perirectal abscess. I didn't know what it was then. I know what it is now. And he couldn't walk, and I had to put him on a sled with 3 other Marines, and we had to drag him down to the aid station, which was about a mile away in a blizzard. And it was cold, and I was afraid we were going to fall off the edge of the mountain. And I'm trying to figure, I'm land naving with a compass. I can feel it's so absolutely blank out. It's getting night, and the blizzard is going. You can't see very far, but you can feel there's something burning from below. I could feel it. It was like something in my eyes. I could tell it was diesel burning. So we started going down, and we found the tents. We found the aid station. We get there, and I walk in, and the doctor's sitting there against a potbelly stove with heat and coffee. And I said, I want to be you. I want to come here. I want to do cool stuff during the day. And then I want to be in a tent and not where I'm going back to tonight. So anyways, they flew the guy out. I went back to my snow cave and thought about that. And as time went on, thinking I graduated with a 3.2. I didn't have great grades in college. I went back after that. I went to a recruiting duty station up in Baltimore, and I retook physics, and I retook organic, and I just did things because I thought C's and B's weren't good enough, but I wanted to show somebody I could do it. And I put all that together into my package and applied to medical school. And I put, as Marines think, here I am. I'm like, all right, it's due on October 29th. October 29th, got the stamp on it, and I sent it out to a total of 4 medical schools. And they were all allopathic, had no idea what I was doing. And I got interviewed at 2. One was Stony Brook, one was Albany Med. And I actually got waitlisted at Albany Med. And then somebody talked to me about osteopathy. And I started kind of reading about it and paying attention. And then I found out that some of my doctors were DOs when I was a kid. And I didn't get it until just then. This light bulb that went off and said, hey, they do a lot of primary care. They're very preventative. That's what I want to do. I want to be a family practice doc who just takes care of people forever. And things change over time, but I put out 2 applications, one to PCOM, one to NICOM, and there was a later requirement. It is funny because the 2 schools that gave me interviews are like, why did you put an application in at the end of October? I said, well, that's the deadline. Well, yeah, but it started in June. I said, but the deadline. And they all laughed at me. They said, obviously, very, very Marine-like. And put in my application earlier and got interviewed at PCOM and got interviewed at NICOM. And PCOM did not accept me, and NICOM did. And I literally remember thinking, this is where I want to go anyway. I'm not going to wait a year for Albany Med. I don't know if I want to go to Albany Med. I really like this whole thought process. And because of then, as I went through it and I wanted to be more surgical, and then I wanted to be a general surgeon, that whole osteopathy really pulled me back to urology, which is not fix it, go on, fix it, go on. I wanted more, but I didn't want just total management. I wanted to put my hands in things. That's how I wound up there.
Your story is spectacular. Love it. I'm going to fast forward a little bit. So you went to NICOM, obviously, then you went back into the Navy and did your time with the Navy, which is well documented in the book. And I'll say for like the 17th time is absolutely worth reading. Can you tell us a little bit about that application after you finished the urology application? And did you do an osteopathic residency in urology? Did you apply to osteopathic urology? Was it military, or how did that go?
I did not. So what wound up happening was back then, if you did an osteopathic residency, you could not sit for the American Board of Urology exams. You just, they wouldn't let you. And times are different now and things are different, but back then you couldn't. So I had looked into that. I had been accepted to the military urology program up in Bethesda to do 2 years general surgery and 4 years urology, and did my first 2 years of general surgery when 9/11 happened. And I wound up kind of getting pulled. I wound up back at Camp Lejeune, deploying with the Marines and going to Iraq the first time and then back the second time. What I think with urology and osteopathy, because the ABU wasn't allowing the sit, I started looking at allopathic programs, and kind of like osteopathy, like the DO school, just like NICOM did for me, this residency, Medical College of Georgia, I put in an application. They were looking to add one resident, and it was off cycle, and there's a bunch of applicants, and I went and I interviewed. And so now it's 2004, it's February. I interview, I don't hear back from them. I call them. I always try and talk nice to the secretaries because they have all the information. I'm like, what's going on? What's going on? And, oh, they love you. There's 2 Navy guys here. They want you to come. I think you're going to get accepted. You're going to go. And I'm like, with a unit, but I'm a battalion surgeon. Actually, at that point, I was a brigade surgeon for a larger unit. They needed somebody to go to 1st Battalion, 8th Marines, and they were looking at me. And I said, all right, I'll go, but only if this residency thing doesn't come through. Well, I never heard from them. So then, middle of June, I'm flying to Iraq. I get into Iraq. I only get email every 2 weeks, maybe. I'm on Haditha Dam. We got to go back to Al Assad to get email. I get back to Al Assad and I'm reading my email, and they say, oh, you're accepted. We'd like you to start on July 1st. I'm like, yeah, that's not going to happen. So I emailed them back and said, I can't take it. Full-time out service, all this. It was what I was trying to get. So full-time out service means that I would be paid as a military, whatever my rank was, as a resident, which I had been accepted for that. And they sent me an email back saying, okay, well, we still want you. Tell us when you're coming back. And I said, I don't know. And they said, what's the latest date? And I said, well, probably January of next year. They said, okay, fine. So they held it for me. And in January, I was just getting out of Fallujah and looking at how I was getting home. No texting. I emailed them and said, looks like I'm not going to be able to start till March 1st. And they said, fine, we'll see you then. So I showed up on March 1st, ready to go, and they accepted me with open arms. It was exactly the way I felt with them as I did when I was around the osteopath, when I went to medical school with the medical students and the people and the instructors and it was more community than it was, hey, I'm going to screw you because I want better grades. And I guess that's the best way I could put it. It was community.
So that's amazing. So you do your training in urology in Georgia. And then when you started looking for a job, again, obvious, I'm a little biased being from New York, and I understand the perspective. Did you think about coming back, or how did you find a job and kind of settle in?
I did talk to you about cold and how much time I spent cold, and I was not coming back to New York. My wife is from Pennsylvania, from Scranton, Melissa Hemlock, and she was not interested in coming back either. So we looked around. When I was getting out of the Navy, I wanted to go rural. And my wife was like, at some point, we were so rural, it's just financially, it makes sense. She said, I don't need Dillard's. I don't need Saks Fifth Avenue, but I need something more than Benny's Dollar Store. Okay. So I kind of had to pull back from that. And we found this place. And this place came to me because a friend of mine, a guy I served with in the Marine Corps, my roommate at basic school, and then later on, Steve Ivory, he was living here. He had 2 kids. He loved the school system in Peachtree City. He said, come check it out. And I kind of avoided it because I thought it was Atlanta. But when I got here, it's an hour. It's 45 minutes south of Atlanta. It's in a very nice little kind of suburbia. But we like it and the schools are good. And so that's where we wound up settling. And I did 9 years with a group at Piedmont, and just literally last year switched over to Wellstar in LaGrange, which is just down the road.
And Richard, I know when you were mentioning that it's interesting, there's a lot of PCOM foothold in Georgia now, right? So do you see osteopathic students and other DOs around?
There are. Yeah, there are. And I actually did the commencement speech up in Suwannee, which is their main campus. And then there's Suwannee's the main campus for PCOM in Georgia. And then there's one down in Moultrie, which is another DO school. They've got physician assistant programs. They've got doctorates in pharmacy and doctorates in physical therapy. So they have a strong foothold down here. It's time New York gets out of the cold and moves south. I've actually been to the one in Arkansas, the NICOM satellite, which very nice, very nice. I mean, they're great schools, and DOs are filling up left and right with good quality people. And every time I see somebody who's a DO, it's refreshing. We have that conversation. I meet them in the OR all the time. A lot of them in Georgia, it's become very big to be a DO.
Richard, your story is awesome. You look happy. I'm really appreciative that you spent time with us. Our grand finale question is, can you give us one piece of advice that you were given from someone else that always resonates with you, that you think is important and you would like to pass on to our listeners?
Yeah. Somebody once told me, never look at the top of the mountain as that is what is filling you. If you just want to get to the top of the mountain, go easy to the top. They said to me, enjoy the journey all the way. So even though medical school sucks and it takes forever, it's hard to get into, enjoy getting there. Once you're in there, enjoy being there. Enjoy laughing about things that go on. Don't struggle to get to the top, because you'll get there. And then once you're at the top, and I see this and I say this all the time when I mentor some medical student. Yeah, you want to get into a practice. You want to make money. You want to have the cars. You want to have this. You want to have that. Look, when you're 35 and now you're going to work every day doing the same thing for the next 30 years of your life, it gets boring. So take some time, enjoy the ride. And for me, that's what I did. I mean, the military, everybody's like, well, it took you so long. You were a resident at 30. I was a resident at 38, and I didn't finish till I was 42. So I remember my junior resident coming in one day into the meeting. All the staff are there. We're doing OR, and I'm the chief resident. And he says, well, we'd like to congratulate Dr. Jadick on being the oldest urology resident in the country. And I looked at him. I said, no, there's one other guy, and he's at EVMS, and I know he's older. And then he looked at me and goes, no, he quit yesterday. He couldn't handle it. So you are now it. So I thought, I've enjoyed my journey. I've never looked for the cash value at the end. I want people to know that if it takes a little extra time, it's okay. There's no rush to get to the end, because the end is the end.
Richard, that's awesome advice. I really can't thank you enough for your time. And I know our listeners are going to love listening to you.
Well, I hope so. And I appreciate it. It's always a privilege to talk to medical students and residents and kind of pass on anything I can help with.
This concludes our episode of Do or Do Not. Send all inquiries, comments, suggestions, and even let us know if there's someone you want us to interview to doordonotpodcast@gmail.com. Don't forget to like us on Facebook at Do or Do Not Podcast for updates. If you enjoyed our podcast, please share it with your classmates and administration. We have plenty of more interviews lined up, and we're excited to share them with you. This is Tian Yu Shea. Thank you guys so much for listening to Do or Do Not.